On this episode of Curtain Call, we learn more about the theater scene in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as we sit down for a conversation with an active member, both on stage and behind the curtain. The spotlight. Daunting, intimidating, quite frankly, not for me, which I realize is a little bit ironic considering I am the host of this show. But for most in the theater industry, that spotlight represents fun, excitement, and an endless run of possibilities with the stories that can be told on a theater stage. In this special episode of Curtain Call, I wanted to sit down with somebody who is active in the theater industry, both on stage and behind the curtain, to learn a little more about this ever-growing world in Nova Scotia.
I'm Sophie Schade, and I've had many jobs. I started out as an actor and then added pretty quickly production, producing, stage management, marketing and communications. Now I'm a producer, but also an administrator. I've done video work, so like helping out with projection design. I've done some video editing as well. I think those are all the hats I've currently worn. My parents are both artists, but they're in the opera world. And so I would grow up kind of going along with them when they were working. So I've seen a lot of opera in my time. But then I think the first real theater show I ever saw was Oliver at the Stratford Festival in Ontario. And I remember that kind of just I was like, oh, this is very different from opera, and this is very fun. And then I think it was just in school, doing little performances or this school musicals. I remember we had one when I was in grade 5. We did Cinderella, and I think that was when I was 10, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be an actor. So my professional training would be at Dalhousie. I went there to the Fountain School of the Performing Arts and did the acting program, which is 4 years, and then you end with, at the time we were doing 3 productions in our final year. And so I would say that's the majority of my training. Before that, I grew up in Ontario, and so in the summers, I did a couple years of, they have a summer Shakespeare program at the Stratford Festival for teenagers. And I think that was where my sort of desire to do professional training really came from, because I really got a lot out of those programs. And in some ways, I think those have really informed my craft, if you want to call it that. And then doing DAL after that was sort of the introduction to the theater community here and building off of a lot of that foundation. A lot of my professional experience is sort of pre-COVID. I did a show with a company here called Zupa, which was called This Is Nowhere, and was sort of a citywide scavenger hunt. So audiences would get an app on their phone and they would follow clues to various locations around Halifax. And when they got there, there was sort of like a stealth performance happening. Often, people were living their lives in the city in and around this and not necessarily knowing that there was a theater performance. And I was performing in the Virtu apartment buildings downtown. Then I did a show with Annie Valentina, who is a writer and director here, that was based off of a study done by the Dalhousie School of Nursing about the experience of queer people giving birth in rural Nova Scotia. So it was like a verbatim theater play taken from that study. And I did a production of Macbeth up at Citadel Hill with sort of a up-and-coming, like, emerging theater company called Steady Theater, which was very fun. We kind of built that show from the ground up, so that one has a very special place in my heart. And I did a summer at Shakespeare by the Sea in 2019, which was a lot of fun. Kind of feels like being at like summer camp for actors. I think with every contract, it sort of shifts and changes. So it's hard to say like these things are things I would typically do on a contract, but I kind of love that because I love learning on the job and getting to do lots of different things. The first show I did any sort of backstage work on professionally was also This Is Nowhere. So I was sort of doing double duty on that, and that was a lot of like running around the city and talking to, the various locations we were having the performances at, and we needed like internet for the app to work. So I was trying to coordinate how to get internet to all these different places that people didn't have to like log into every time they got somewhere, which is just like very show specific. Yeah, recently in the spring was the first time I did any sort of like video projections work on shows. That was At This Hour with Zupa and The Movements with Zupa. And I was working with the projections designer, Christian Ludwig Hansen, who's also a great friend and a very talented designer. And he kind of was showing me the works there, and I learned how to use Isadora is the software for projection design, and so that was all very new to me. And now I am the producer for Zupa Theater, and so a lot of that on the day-to-day just looks like the kind of maybe not very exciting nitty-gritty stuff that goes into running a theater company, which is, bookkeeping and making sure that everything gets filed correctly and people get paid, and that we're, staying on budget or helping write grants. That's all really the important stuff that keeps those companies running. And so getting to learn that is very helpful and important. And then we're going to go into some shows this summer. And so it's a very collaborative environment there. And so I look forward to also getting to be involved like on the creative side of things as well. And, ideas from everyone are always welcome in the room. And so that's that's a bit about what I'm doing right now, is the work with Zupa.
From the many conversations we've had so far this season, it's become abundantly clear that there's one key factor that is absolutely crucial to the success of the theater space. And that is, of course, community.
I think the community is bigger than people expect. When you're not directly involved in theater, or it's maybe not something that you are interested in on the day-to-day, it gets pretty easy to sort of, in my experience, people know Neptune, and they don't know a whole lot about what's going on beyond that. But there are lots of companies, professional, emerging, whatever, that are living and working and making art here. And so I think that the theater community generally is quite close-knit. Like, it's bigger than people expect, but it is still, maybe Halifax size. So we all I think for the most part, try to support each other. And obviously lately it's been challenging. So I think COVID really shut a lot of things down. And then for a while, we were seeing that it was really hard to get things back up to sort of the way they were before COVID. And I feel like we're just kind of starting to, as a community, like get our feet back under us in the last like maybe year and a half. But you know, you'll see that there are companies that tend to work with the same people, but that also everyone is kind of working on everything a little bit. The community larger than theater really helps support us in that. I'm particularly thinking of what the bus stop was going through, and now because time has been so unreal the last few years, I can't even remember if it was like right before COVID or right after, but the bus stop theater, which is like a very vital theater space here, was sort of in danger of losing their space on Gottingen, and we'd lost a few other theater spaces in the years leading up to that, and it was sort of like the last, is still in some ways the last holdout of theater space, and I really saw that the community, the theater community, but also the community of Halifax at large rallied to save the bus stop and allow it to continue to be the sort of important arts institution that it is in this city. I think art is often sort of driving society in a way, like the things that are reflected in art is what is pushing us to grow and change as a society. So you'll often see things in various media of art before they've sort of trickled down to society at large. So I think it is important just for, you know, growth of people in the community here and broadening perspectives and, you know, encouraging diversity and all of that. But I think also it allows, I don't know, like it's fun and it can bring a sense of joy to people's lives, and you see things you might not ordinarily see. Sometimes art gets brought in from other parts of the country or other countries even, and then you get to, you know, meet or work with or see the perspectives of people that are typically very far away from us. I think that we do have a small theater community here, and there maybe isn't always as much happening as there are in other bigger cities like Toronto or Vancouver or Edmonton. And so that kind of makes it all the more important for us to support what we do have here and allow it to hopefully continue to grow and exist.
Currently, Sophie is working with the Halifax-based Zupa Theatre Company, a group I wanted to learn more about, with its history, its current projects, as well as its future.
Yeah, it's been around for 25 years, and Zupa creates all their own shows. Typically at the core of each show is sort of the desire to do something that we've never done before, whether that's, you know, create an app like This Is Nowhere, this like wild scavenger hunt, or the show that we did most recently at Alderney Landing, which was The Movements, which was sort of a examination of the global economy told through the lens of an 80s style workout routine. So there's always something kind of new and quirky going on. But yeah, I would say that Zupa is very focused on devising their own work, collaboration, and learning new things. So currently, we've been in a bit of a development year, but this summer we are going to produce a new show called Caliban of Sipekne'katik in association with the Mi'kmaq community of Sipekne'katik First Nation, which is sort of a retelling examination of The Tempest, or the characters in The Tempest, specifically Caliban and Ariel, who are indigenous to the island that the wizard Prospero finds himself on. And that will be sort of retold through Mi'kmaq oral history and traditional practices. So we're working with Richard Taylor, who is a Mi'kmaq elder and artist and cultural carrier, to create that show. And we're currently in development, sort of ongoing for Zupa's next show after that, which would be Strata, which is all about Nova Scotian geology and time and physics and science. And then we have a couple of our previously produced shows that will go on tour. So The Archive of Missing Things, which is a theater show that happens in a library, is going to Quebec this summer in June. And we're hoping that the movements will go onward to other places soon as well.
As our conversation continued, I realized that I had yet to ask one of the most exciting questions I get to ask here on Curtain Call. And that is, what is the play that really blew you away the first time you saw it?
My favorite show that I've ever seen, and I didn't get to see it in person, but this means that anybody watching this can also have the opportunity to see it, is the Bridge Theatre's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was filmed in the UK, which was filmed by National Theatre Live. And it is just, it's big, it's fun, it's raucous. There's the best use of Beyonce's Love on Top I've ever heard. You know, there's like dance breaks, there's glitter, there's confetti. The performances are incredible. It feels like A Midsummer Night's Dream like you've never seen it before. It's the best.
While Sophie has spent a great deal of time working behind the scenes in the theater world, performing is also at the heart of the work she does in the art space, an aspect that can be incredibly intimidating when allowing yourself to become so vulnerable for a crowd.
Yeah, it definitely is a vulnerable thing. But I think there's this element of when you're on stage and anything can happen, you are feeding off of, you know, your scene partner's energy, but also the audience. And so it is this very rare moment where however many people are in that room are really sharing an experience together. And some of my favorite moments are when things go a little bit wrong. And so then you on stage, like not so wrong that the audience is ever worried, but just where the actors on stage are like, oh, we're really in this present moment, and we're really like listening to each other and figuring out how we're gonna keep going with this little wrinkle. And it just feels like play, like in this way that I don't think we really get to do as adults very often. But that, you know, like I said, everyone in the room is there with you, and you get to experience all kinds of things that you maybe do in real life as well, but in a way that is like vulnerable, but still very, very safe. Or maybe things that you might never get to explore, and that gives you the opportunity to kind of experience something outside of yourself.
My first experience with Sophie was when she was a part of the team for the dramatic miniseries I directed in 2021, titled The Last Divide, a 6-episode series that aired on Eastlink Community TV. On the surface, it would seem the similarities are quite endless for both theater and film, but I wanted to know, from Sophie's perspective, what that crossover looked like.
Maybe not as much as I expected. I think that I had this idea of, you know, film and theater are obviously both artistic practices, and so I think I came into it thinking that there would be a lot more crossover than there is. And I think in some cases that is true. You have, you know, plenty of actors in the Halifax community that do theater and do film. People like Taylor Olson and Coombe, who are both writer, producer, directors here, who also have done and continue to do theater work. My work in film has largely been on the crew side of things. There are certainly like crew members who I've worked at theaters like Neptune and whatever, who then go into film work. But I don't know that there's as much awareness on either side of what the other side is doing, or sort of what I was saying before, like in my experience, a lot of film people know Neptune, but maybe not the smaller theater companies. But I think that seems to sort of be true of Halifax artistic communities in general. Like there isn't as much crossover as I think could maybe be beneficial. I don't think the theater community knows a ton about the music community, or that the visual arts community knows a ton about the film community. And of course, there's exceptions to every rule, but I am curious about what could happen, I think, if we all kind of got to know each other's work a little bit better.
As our conversation began to wind down, I had only one question left for Sophie. I wanted to know what she was hopeful for when it came to the future of the theater scene in Halifax and, more broadly, Nova Scotia.
I would like to see it continue to grow and find more of that support. There's sort of a running joke in the theater community here that, people either grow up here or come here to train or whatever, and then they stick around for a little while, and then they go to Toronto. And then finally, once they've gone to Toronto, do they start actually working in Halifax? And I think, broadening your perspectives is important to creating better art. But sometimes I wonder if we lose fresh voices or different perspectives, or all of those new up-and-coming artists, because they move to bigger cities where there is more opportunity. And largely that's because I don't know that there is as much support for the arts in Halifax and Nova Scotia as there are in other provinces. And so it does become very hard to make work here. I think that Arts Nova Scotia said that 2 years ago was, the biggest year they've ever had for people writing in applications for grants, that their applications doubled in 1 year, and they were sort of blown out of the water by that. And then the next year, they doubled again. So there are lots of people who are trying to make art here, but there just aren't really enough resources for it to be possible to support all of the art that is, I guess, desired to be made. And part of that is the fact that we don't really have a lot of spaces other than the bus stop. Part of that is that there isn't, I think, funding reflective of what the community is trying to do here, and that other bigger cities are maybe more enticing to someone who's starting out. And so we kind of lose a lot of, diversity in artistic practice, maybe. So I guess all that is to say that I hope that, Halifax continues to grow, and that the theater scene here continues to evolve and change as our world does, and that we see more different styles of performance or types of theater or whatever, and just continue to broaden our perspectives.